It was a banner year for Shopify, and every single year prints a new high. So e-commerce just becomes bigger and bigger. Shopping from home is how basically people shop now. The one thing that sticks out from our perspective, a change in the way that inbox providers are sending messages to spam. If you are a brand that does email, this affects you. It's going to have to change the way everybody approaches their email program. A lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, having a rich segmentation model, paying attention to different parts of your audience that you're speaking to, bottom line, that stuff's all going the way of the dodo. AI is going to do all that. But if you're out there, here's your chance to actually learn how the segmentation in the audiences work.
It's all Killer No Filler, the D2C podcast. I'm Eric, and I'm here with the star of the other podcast on the D2C podcast network, TWBURP, the world's best email and retention podcast, Jordan Gordon. Welcome back to All Killer No Filler. Maybe let's start with a little, we're on Cyber Tuesday here, if that's such a thing, just right after the Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend, Cyber Wednesday, I guess at this point. But this is going to launch a week out. But I'm just curious, what was your high-level take on the retention side of Black Friday, Cyber Monday in 2024?
We had a lot of accounts that did really well, and this is actually kind of just what you and I were talking about just before the pod started. Was like it was like a banner year for Shopify, and there's some articles floating around. And I'll tell you, in the last 25 years I've been in e-com, every single year prints a new high. So e-commerce just becomes bigger and bigger. Shopping from home is how basically people shop now. And you had said, hey, you've heard that it's out there in the non-pilot house
sphere.
Yeah, it's rough for people. So give me what you've read there. I'm interested.
It's hard to say. When I look at the Pilot House channels, we're all shouting out all of our wins, so I see that, and then I see a lot of the wins that the D2C influencers on Twitter, the Twitterati, are promoting out there. So you hear a lot of those positive stories. I've heard privately some brands struggled. It's always going to be a case of haves or haves not, and have nots. I know the tide is rising, as Shopify's posts indicates. Overall purchases are up. I think I heard that Cyber Monday, from a more than one person, Cyber Monday was a little weaker this year, and that it was a little bit more front loaded than in previous years. But what did you see on some of our major accounts?
Well, first of all, interesting point on the, some people out there saying it's difficult and the haves and have-nots. The article that was going around, the interesting thing that the gentleman was saying was that a lot of the brands that are just selling tons are new brands, right? So kind of like, the storied brands are having a hard time because new upstarts that are kind of online native understand exactly how people are shopping, understand exactly how to talk to them. The moats are getting very, very dry, right? The barriers to entry are getting very, very low. And kind of if you've got a good idea or can, a good product, or you can give, the same quality product for a little bit cheaper, you can just go right to Shopify and just smash. So that's the interesting point there is, some people are struggling, and a lot of them are the storied brands. I'll just say that generally our brands did really well and we're up. The one thing that sticks out, and I've got a podcast on it dropping in like early January, so I won't give it all away. Everybody, of course, go out, subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast. Check out that episode when it drops. But the one thing that sticks out from our perspective is a change in the way that inbox providers are sending messages to spam, right? And this is a little under the hood, but if you are a brand that does email, this affects you. So
they all do. They have to.
Yeah. You can't scale without email. So I'll just break this down a bit, right? We discussed epic year for Shopify, right? And also, my wife and I moved to Mexico. We actually still technically are Canadian residents. We don't stay anywhere long enough to become tax residents. We want to check out Paraguay and Argentina too. So I'm kind of, getting a feel for the Latino sphere. And I checked out Shopify, and there's like 6 or 7% as many Shopify accounts in the Latino sphere as there is in the Anglosphere, right? So early days. I mean, if you assume the economy is going to progress the same, there's a lot of runway, and then there's a lot more emails to stuff in Gmail, Yahoo, and Hotmail inboxes. And Gmail, Yahoo, and Hotmail are reacting, and they're tightening, right? Because this whole thing is just compounding and exploding, and everybody's just stuffing so many emails in the inbox. So the difference that we saw that I noticed this year, and this is new from last year, and we've been on it a couple of times, and I've said we don't know what's going to happen this year. It's a new year in a new kind of inboxing regime. So in the old way of doing things, there was a statistical threshold you had to make it with the inbox providers for them to say this email is good enough to inbox, and it's like the construction of the email. A lot of it's mostly just engagement or people clicking. And we've had this talk many times. Hey, one Navy SEAL can take two kind of hostages, right? You know what I mean? One really engaged address can get two kind of lesser engaged addresses into an email. What I saw this year to a much greater degree than I'd ever seen is selectively putting addresses into spam, where even if the email is fine, inbox is fine, sells lots, making money, when you look, we do a 12 segment model. So we look at all different parts of the audience, and there were just groups within there, even though the email was fine, just boom, in spam. And so what Gmail and Yahoo are kind of saying, I think, is you guys go stuff yourselves. Because of course, what do we spammers do? We do the Navy SEALs thing. Hey, we'll get just enough engaged addresses in and then stuff in these unengaged ones, make sure they see the sale, right? And kind of just, yeah, they're just like, tell you what, we'll just do the segmentation for you. So that's, I saw that to a greater degree than I'd ever seen, because of course it was a banner year for e-com. Every year's a banner year for e-com, basically. It's never end. So that's going to change. I mean, look, it's going to change the way that we approach, but it's going to have to change the way everybody approaches their email program.
So are you saying that it's like in previous years where you would have seen like maybe bigger segments going to spam kind of being cast with the same brush, that Google's starting to get smarter in the same way we talk about shotgun versus sniper rifles? They're able to sniper off the ones that should be in spam rather than sending whole emails to spam?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah. And for all of you who are listening, and of course, subscribe to the World's Best Email Retention Podcast, I talk about in this episode sniper segments and continuation, and these things that you can do to improve your program in 2025 to build an audience. Also, some other topics to build an audience. But kind of big takeaway, things that you and I were talking about 2 years ago are even, because the trend is clear, right? Harder to get in the inbox if you're sending crap, or you're sending to people who aren't interested. So those things are just all the more relevant. And I had to go through and watch these old episodes again and kind of reacquaint myself so I could do the podcast.
Cool. So Google getting smarter as always, more emails to send. Do we send more emails this year? I think that was a theme last year during Black Friday, that we felt we had to send more emails to achieve the same results. Did that trend continue, or have we kind of maxed out on emails sent?
It's pretty much the standard now to send 3 or so emails on Black Friday proper. You know what I mean? And then the days around that, it's pretty much standard to just pummel the inbox. But here's the thing, everybody out there, right? If you do that and you don't tighten it, Gmail and Yahoo are just going to pick who they don't want to send to. And listen to this, they're going to pick who they don't want to send to. Did they know which of those addresses are your whale repeat buyers? No.
No, they have no idea.
They don't know.
No.
Right? So you don't want them selecting which messages to not include. So sniper segments, we're going to get into it in the episode in January, and we'll tell everybody where to go to look to reacquaint themselves with that from a couple of years ago. But yeah, the standard is lots of messages, but everybody out there, you got to make sure you don't shoot yourself in the foot and send to too large an audience so that Gmail starts picking stuff off, and they pick off the ones you don't want them to pick off. And there's going to be this tug, this push and pull that's going to happen, I mean, forever, basically.
You also mentioned just a little tidbit here, but you mentioned a really successful subject line that you piloted this Black Friday. What was that?
Yeah, this was just kind of, I just noticed this one. Someone brought it to me, and because it actually contradicted one of my statements in the 2 Black Friday episodes I did. And I have nothing like shame, so I don't mind coming out here and saying, hey, here's something that was particularly worked, even if it goes against my recommendations. Also, I think my recommendations more often than not will steer you in the right direction. Of course, a subject line can win, but it was interesting. It was and yeah, Brianna, my number one, brought it to me. She used it, and it was not your average Black Friday email with the two little eyes looking sideways, right? So just not your average Black Friday email. And that was very successful, and
That's the
and
hook.
also
That sets you up.
yeah, and it's just like later in the season, and she pointed out, and it makes sense. This is exactly what I said in my Black Friday kind of talks was, yeah, if you want to get cute later on when everybody is completely aware of your offer. So don't lead with that. This was like almost before Black Friday. It was into Black Friday. So yeah, it just won. So look, a couple of the things here that I wanted to just kind of touch on that we discussed, and maybe you might find them interesting. I did a talk on the 6 biggest mistakes people are making in segmentation. And I was actually musing on this one this morning as I was looking on my calendar. Oh yeah, I got the DTC podcast today. That like a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, having a rich segmentation model, paying attention to different parts of your audience that you're speaking to. Bottom line, that stuff's all going the way of the dodo. AI is going to do all that. It's just right now, the companies that are at the level of AI where they can just do that, it's the Googles and the Metas. Klaviyo is not there yet. But as the technology becomes more affordable, more ubiquitous, just like Gmail and Yahoo are picking which addresses to drop, Klaviyo is going to pick which addresses to even send. And so, first of all, I don't know what the running room is for that. It might be in a couple of years, right? But if you're out there, here's your chance, and you're running out of chance to actually learn how the segmentation and the audiences work. And here's the import. Your job in future will be to evaluate how well an AI system is going to work at scale by looking at tests. Because you're going to say it's going to take money and time to launch this thing. You're going to send a small amount, or you're going to do an introductory thing, a small thing, and then you're going to look at the results and you're going to evaluate: is this right for my audience, for my technical system, for my digital ecosystem? And then you're going to go large. So everybody out there better know how to do like statistical significance, first of all, but also just if you don't understand how it works under the hood, how are you going to evaluate if what you're going to be launching is right? So go check out the pod on the 6 biggest mistakes people are making in segmentation to get an understanding of what's happening with segmentation. But also keep in mind, figure out what you're doing here. Get under the hood and figure email out. Because once the AIs are doing it, if you don't understand what they're applying their stuff to, you're going to just be in the dark and you're just hoping for the best.
That applies to so much in the media buying and advertising world. Whether you're using Meta's AI tools or Google's AI tools, you need to know what each part does, even if you're using them, so that you can kind of reverse engineer, pull data out, and quite often you can do better than those tools can, especially in the early days. So it really behooves you to get good at it.
Yeah, for sure. And so look, wrap all this up. I'll just say wrap all this up. What we're thinking about and what I'm thinking about in my sales process and what I'll recommend to anybody. We talked about in the very first episode of Twerp. We talked about the 4 different strategies someone can use for their account. And one was time savings. And that was focused on a lot of automations. Well, I'll tell you what, if campaigns are going to be more restricted, and I've been on your pod and my own pod saying like, hey, what's up when you've got 60% open rate and a 0.42% click-through rate. And if you go in and remove your Apple privacy opens, it's going to cut your list size in half. What you're doing is just sending out a bunch of emails. How'd your click rate get so low? Gmail and Yahoo are just putting it in spam. I was watching it all year. And finally, as I had all the data, I knew what was going on, but I was watching it happen all year. So if that's what's going on for you, it's like time to get off the camp. It's like I remember when I was a young man working, went over to Germany and got really hungover and went to work and the boss sat me down and said, "Hey Jordan, I think it's time to switch to beer." You know what I mean? So it's like, hey, if that's what's happening with your campaign program, it's time to switch to flows. right? It's time to really focus on speaking to people in an automated fashion because Gmail and Yahoo are getting indigestion on your massive campaign bloat. So that's a big thing that we're going to just be talking about this year.
Switch to beer in the new year. I love it. Interesting. Yeah, this game is only evolving, so you've got to stay ahead of the curve. I'm sure there's lots of people in the audience right now who probably have, like, we'd use the Marine who can carry, maybe non-respondent addresses. I bet your Marines are tired after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? Like their legs, their dogs are barking. And I bet there's a lot of brands like how do you know, like after Black Friday, Cyber Monday, is there a hangover period where you've got to like rehab things a little bit in a lot of cases?
That was our original sniper segments pod.
Yeah.
It was 2 Januaries ago. That's exactly right. So you tighten up significantly in January. And look, here's the research. Most of the revenue in any campaign is from people who've been on the site in the last 30 days. Period. Right? So when you tighten up, the net loss, if you're in the inbox, when you tighten up, is small. When you're in the spam folder and you tighten up, the net loss is a gain because you increase your audience. More people see the messages. So absolutely, this is kind of what we said in our kind of client calls going to the end of the year. Hey, if we're not cleaning up your inboxing in January, we didn't go hard enough. So everybody out there, if things are looking rough in January, it's like a good New Year's Eve hangover. Good for you. You really went for it. And now just make yourself have an orange juice and just kind of slow it down a little bit. Right?
Liquor to beer to orange juice. I see the life cycle. I just have a selfish question. Have you ever worked for a brand? I know you worked with some big Fortune 500 brands maybe before this that used dedicated IPs versus shared IP pools.
There was no such thing as a shared IP pool when I started. First of all, so that's kind of that wasn't a thing. You just had your own domain, you had your own IP, and you were just like, 3 sheets to the wind. Here's the thing. When you're on a shared IP, look, it's the tragedy of the commons, right? As there's usually, like for Klaviyo, for instance, you're on a different sender, but I'm sure it's the same. You've got different tiers. And as long as you can remain in the highest tier, you want to send as dirty as you can, but still stay in the highest tier. It's like a game of blackjack, right? So, and if you make a mistake, other people but you recover from it, other people's sending smooths it over. When you have your own IP, the benefit is if you are really, really, really clean about everything, about the way you construct your messages, your subject lines, your engagement, everything, then you get all the benefit. And of course, the opposite is if you are dirty, you don't have anyone to lift you up. So it's kind of like it's all up to you once you're on your own IP. There's good things and bad things. At a certain size, I think everybody's on their own IP. There is, I don't remember the number. I'd have to go look up the number, but there's a send size where you should be on your own IP. And honestly, I think you're there. Like
we're there. And because we send so regularly, we're not sending campaigns. We're not, we're only sending what people are expecting 5 times a week, which is a lot for some people for sure. But yeah, it's funny. I remember reading a case study by Marketing Brew, who's a company that we've been following closely since they started, Morning Brew rather, and they saw huge benefits by going to a dedicated IP. And so
if your send size is too high and you're on the and you're not on your own IP, it's going to be scrutinized differently. This is my understanding. Yeah. We haven't actually tested this specifically on the switch, so I'm just going to say my understanding. But my understanding is that if you are on a shared IP, you're scrutinized differently. And here's like another important point. So what Gmail likes, and I'm sure the other ones too, is predictability. So if you've got 1 million addresses and you just send a nice clean million one, 90, 99, you know what I mean? And it's just like that over time. They love that because then they can figure out how much throughput they need. They can project. If you're going like this all over the place, it can cause a bit of trouble. So you guys are super predictable. So if you're going to go on a shared IP, which can go like this, it's actually going to make it a little bit worse for you. If you were on your own IP, you'd have that advantage too. I mean, like bottom line, I think you should do it.
Yeah, we're gonna.
It's time.
You heard it here first. I've been pushing for it for a while, and I think I've got the organizational fortitude now to make it happen. It's funny, your metaphor with the Marines taking, dead emails across the list or whatever, that's the way the whole system works, right? If you think about, because someone would take our regular sending, and we've had companies try to talk us out of going to a dedicated IP, probably because they like having us in their shared pools because we're so predictable. They lift up some of their other people. So it's a bit of a dance
people
there.
Like their messages too, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah. If they look at you and your click-through rate is above their average click-through rate, they want you in.
Yeah.
Period. If it's below, They don't necessarily want you in. Well, I mean, if you're paying, they'll still take you, right? Yeah. That's how that works.
Interesting. Yeah. Cool. What's been your favorite episode for people who are listening to this podcast but haven't yet jumped over to a burp to make it a regular of their podcasts? What episode do you recommend people jump into? The first one?
Email Fight Companion.
Oh, that's right. Email Fight Companion. It's a cool idea.
Email Fight Companion. And we ran, for anybody who didn't see the teasers and stuff, we ran 12 brands, six bouts to see six bouts, 8 bouts. Some of them were double bouts to see which brands had the best emails. It was really fun. We ran the Federal Reserve against Pampers. So the organization that gives financial liquidity to the world against the organization that gives diapers to the world. So there was some fun stuff.
Liquidity. It stops liquidity for a certain portion of the population.
It does stop liquidity. That's true. And what we also had, of course, very serious bouts: Ralph Lauren versus Gucci, which was the lead bout. Dewar versus Anthropology, kind of a newer brand versus an established brand. Punching above its weight. Best email of the night went to Anthropology, who make amazing, beautiful emails. So if you're at all interested in just looking at hearing 3, we also had the 2 other channel heads. So it's like 3 channel heads looking at messages, giving their thoughts, from a wide, e-commerce wide perspective, and looking for ideas from there to improve your own layouts and designs. Great episode to watch. Also lots of fun.
Nice. All right, well, go check that out on Spotify or YouTube because you probably want to get the visuals along with it. We'll maybe include a link to that one in the show notes here. But otherwise, we just got our Spotify Wrapped for the year. We'll be putting some of that out on social media. One of my favorite stats about ours is that there was 500 people who we were their number one podcast that they listened to the most. And I was looking at yours, and I think you guys already have like 20 or 30 people you are their number one most listened to podcast in this year's Wrapped, and you've only started it like a couple months ago. So I'm really excited for the way it's going, getting hundreds of listens on each episode.
Are we ever going to get the e-com head from Filson? He loved that Filson episode I did.
Oh, I was actually just going over his email today. I don't know if I sent it. I think it might have got lost in the Black Friday shuffle, but yeah, I think that's such a great idea to get more brands on the podcast is just to like review their funnels publicly. Then they got to contact us, right?
Yeah. Well, especially if it's an amazing funnel, right?
We'll only praise. I like that. We'll only praise.
Well, when we did Email Fight Companion, there were some brands that lost, and it's like H&M was a big loser, which is actually they're a big brand. So it's, in that case, I mean, maybe we won't tag H&M. H&M, if you're out there, sorry, I just randomly picked an email. I wasn't fixing fights. But of course, when I do a focus on one brand, I'm only going to pick an amazing brand. I'm not going to put someone through 40 minutes of what not to do. I'm going to put them through 40 minutes of what to do.
Love it. If I don't talk to you, have a very happy holidays, very Merry Christmas down in Mexico.
Yeah, you too. Talk to you later.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're not getting the D2C newsletter, you can subscribe for free at directtoconsumer.co. And if you want to learn more about Pilot House's all-killer, no-filler services, take off to pilothouse.co. I'm Eric Dick, and this has been the D2C Podcast. We'll see you next time.